Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. Tyler lifted his glass toward Grace and dropped my ex's name. For a second, I thought I misheard him and stalled. My chest tightened around that one word like a fist closing. Grace laughed on reflex, then stopped halfway through the sound. I am Evan, 30, and that moment still lives in my teeth. Wait, who? Grace asked, fingers still on her glass. She looked at Tyler first, then turned straight to me. My brain scrambled for a harmless answer that did not exist. I forced a smile that probably looked painful on my face. I knew already that tonight was going somewhere bad. Tyler grinned like this was a party game gone spicy. You know, he said, leaning closer across the table. The one Evans thought he would marry before you showed up. He watched Grace, not me, like he wanted her reaction. That is when my stomach actually dropped, not just figuratively. Dude, enough. My hand hit his wrist before I thought. I tried to make it playful so Grace would not panic. My fingers shook against his skin and I hoped they did not. He pulled his arm back and raised both hands in surrender. Relax, I am just messing around, he said, eyes still bright. Grace stayed quiet and that scared me more than shouting. She kept her face neutral but her jaw clenched once. I noticed her engagement ring catch the light as she shifted. She slid her hand from the table and into her lap. That tiny move felt louder than anything Tyler had said. I should have changed the subject hard and immediately. Instead, I laughed too loud and tried a weak joke. You hear this guy, he is obsessed with ancient history. The words came out thin like I had swallowed dust. Grace looked at me like she was waiting for something real. Ancient? Tyler snorted and shook his head at me. He leaned back, still relaxed, like nothing was actually wrong. You two were serious, I am not rewriting the storyline here. He flicked his eyes toward Grace again, almost curious now. I hated that I understood his curiosity, and that made everything worse. Were you really that serious? Grace finally asked, voice steady. She spoke to me, but her gaze stayed on the table. My pulse jumped so hard I heard it in my ears. There were 100 ways to answer and none felt safe. I picked the one that sounded calm, which was my first mistake. We were young, it was intense, it ended. Short answer, controlled tone, like I was reading a script. It was not a lie, but it was not the whole story. I felt Tyler watching me like he wanted to call bullshit. I prayed he would stay quiet for once in his life. He did not, of course he did not. Ended, yeah, he said, dragging the word out too long. If you ignore all the times you two circled back afterward. Grace's head snapped up so fast her hair brushed her cheek. I felt something actually tilt inside the room when that landed. I turned on Tyler with a look I usually reserve for strangers. Seriously, drop it, I said, and my voice finally sounded sharp. He blinked, taken aback, then his mouth set in a thin line. For a flash, I saw his pride flare up like a match. He looked between us like he dared me to keep pretending. Okay, my bad, he said, lifting his hands again. He reached for his drink and took a slow, heavy swallow. The glass hit the table a little harder than it needed. He kept his eyes on the surface, avoiding both our faces. That was the first time I wondered whose side he was on. Grace exhaled through her nose, a long, careful breath. You circled back, she said, testing the words out loud. She was not yelling, which somehow felt worse than yelling. Her eyes went from Tyler to me, then stayed on me. I could feel the night splitting into before and after. I tried to patch the hole with speed and confidence. It was messy, it still ended, that is the important part. I reached for her hand under the table and squeezed lightly. She let me hold it, but her fingers stayed stiff in mine. I knew she was not buying the neat version I was selling. Tyler watched our hands, then looked away with a short laugh. Look, I am not trying to start drama tonight, he said. He pushed his chair back a little, restless, almost annoyed now. If we cannot mention the past around here, I missed the memo. That line hit me harder than he probably expected, or maybe not. I could feel my face heat and my patience thin fast. You did miss it, I said, keeping my tone low and tight. Because I told you this topic was off limits with Grace. The last word came out sharper than I planned and almost cracked. Grace's eyes widened slightly like she just realized there were rules already. You told him that, she asked, turning toward me fully. She pulled her hand free and rested it on her knee instead. Now I was pinned between her suspicion and his irritation. I wished I could rewind 30 minutes and stay home. I could tell this was no longer just about my ex. Yeah, I did, I said, feeling. Gee, stupid but cornered. I just do not want our engagement swallowed by old stuff. It sounded reasonable, yet I heard the defensive edge myself. Grace pressed her lips together, thinking, weighing, building a story. I knew I had just confirmed her worst guess without meaning to. Tyler checked his watch like he suddenly remembered other plans. Look, I should probably head out anyway, he muttered, almost bored. The careless tone made me want to throw something at his head. He stood and pushed his chair back with a dull scrape. He clapped my shoulder once, then glanced at Grace with a half smile. You are marrying a legend, you know that, right? He chuckled, then added my ex's name again like a punchline. Grace flinched this time, not enough to be dramatic, just real. He walked away before either of us could answer or breathe. I watched him leave and realized I did not recognize my best friend. Silence settled between me and Grace like a third person. She did not look at me, just stared straight ahead. Her thumb kept turning the ring on her finger in circles. I waited for a question or a blow-up that never came. For some reason, her quiet felt like the loudest alarm. Now writing this, I know that dinner was the first crack. At the time, I told myself it was just awkward banter. I convinced myself Grace would forget once things calmed down. I underestimated how deep that name would sink into everything. I had no idea this was the night my wedding started shaking. Grace yanked the car door shut and stared straight ahead. Her seatbelt clicked fast and sharp like she wanted it over. I slid behind the wheel and fumbled the key once. The engine finally caught and the sound filled the silence. We pulled away from the curb with that question hanging between us. For the first few blocks, I tried stupid small talk. Food was good, I said like we had just left brunch. She rested her elbow on the door and watched the street. Her mouth stayed tight, almost like she was holding something in. I kept talking anyway because quiet felt worse than lying. You okay? I asked, fingers tight around the steering wheel. Her head tilted just a little like she was surprised. I am trying to decide how honest to be, she answered. That line hit harder than anything Tyler had thrown earlier. I suddenly wanted another red light just to stall the fallout. What does that mean? My voice came out softer than planned. I cleared my throat and tried for a calmer tone. If something is bothering you, I want to hear it. I listened to myself and hated how rehearsed I sounded. Even I would not trust me with that customer service voice. It means I am not fine, she answered, eyes still forward. Her fingers curled into her jacket like she needed something solid. I just watched your best man quiz me about your past. She shook her head once with a dry, humorless little laugh. And apparently he knows more about it than I do. Traffic slowed as we hit a long line at a light. The brake pedal pressed back under my foot and held us. I stared at the intersection instead of looking at her. If I met her eyes, I knew I would flinch. I already felt like I was losing an argument I had not started. Tyler was out of line, I said, jaw tight. I told him that before, I will tell him again. It sounded reasonable, sure, but it did not touch her point. She finally turned her face toward me, studying me quietly. I could feel her checking every word for cracks. You told him before, she repeated, eyebrows lifting slightly. How many times has he pulled this stunt around me? Her tone stayed calm, which somehow made it sting more. I searched my memory faster than I could form sentences. I knew at least one time, maybe two, and that scared me. There were a couple of jokes, I admitted, eyes back on traffic. I shut them down, you did not catch most of them. Saying that out loud instantly sounded worse than keeping quiet. Now it was not just Tyler pushing boundaries, it was me hiding patterns. I heard her breath catch like I had just confirmed a suspicion. So you filtered what I heard, she said, voice lower now. Her hands folded together in her lap before pulling apart again. Why would your friend feel so comfortable talking about her? She did not say X, she used her name clear and sharp. Hearing it from Grace made my fingers numb on the wheel. He is terrible at reading the room, I answered too fast. The car crept forward a few feet, then stopped again. He treats everything like a bit, like a running joke. I pushed the words out quickly, hoping speed would convince her. It just sounded like I was auditioning excuses for a panel. He was not joking tonight, she replied, staring at the dashboard. He wanted my reaction, you saw that, you had to see it. Her knee bounced once, a short nervous jerk, then stilled. If he still talks to her, I need to know now. That last sentence landed like a test I had not studied for. I hesitated for a beat too long and she noticed. Her head turned slowly and her eyes snapped onto mine. He reaches out now and then, I admitted, heat crawling up my neck. I keep it surface level when he brings her up. I did not mention the messages I ignored instead of shutting down. So he talks to her and then jokes with me, she said. She laughed once in disbelief, then dropped the sound quickly. And he is supposed to stand next to you at the altar. Her hand went to her ring, thumb pushing against the band. She did not twist it, she pressed like she was testing its strength. The light changed and a car behind us honked once. I lurched forward, more reaction than decision, heart beating too fast. I wanted to defend Tyler, which felt insane in that moment. I also wanted to defend myself, and those goals clashed hard. It felt like every sentence could either save us or crack us further. I am not still involved with her, I said, words slow now. I am not sneaking around, I am not double booking my life. None of that answered what she actually asked, and I knew it. Grace watched me for a few seconds, then looked back out. I could tell she was clocking every dodge and filing it away. I noticed something tonight, she said, voice steady again. When Tyler used her name, you froze before you reacted. My grip tightened and the wheel creaked softly under my hands. You did not just get annoyed with him, you looked scared. That observation knocked the air out of my next planned lie. I was blindsided, I said, which was at least partly true. I did not expect him to bring her up so aggressively. I dragged in a breath and forced myself to keep going. I panicked because I saw you there, stuck between us. That finally sounded like my real voice instead of a script. She went quiet for a stretch while the road hummed underneath. I watched the lane markings slide by like little countdowns. Do you still care about her in that way? She asked. No edge, no drama, just a direct cut straight through. Everything in me wanted to jump to a loud, immediate no. No, I answered, but I let a second pass first. I care that she was a chapter, that is all. My chest hurt while I said it, not from missing anyone. It hurt because I realized how easily I could still confuse myself. Sometimes history pretends to be feeling, and that lie is sneaky. Grace looked down at her hands and drew in a breath. If that is true, I need your choices to match, she said. I should not feel like your friend is guarding her memory. She swallowed, eyes shining in the passing streetlights for a moment. And I should not feel like I am the outsider in my own relationship. We turned onto our street and the conversation did not slow. I pulled into our spot and shifted into park by muscle memory. The car idled while we just sat there listening to nothing. Grace unbuckled and stayed seated, fingers resting near the door handle. It felt like if she stepped out wrong, everything might spill over. I am asking you something simple, she finally said, quieter now. Her eyes stayed on the dashboard instead of my face. Are you willing to distance yourself from someone who keeps her alive? Her voice cracked on that last word just a little, then steadied. Because right now it feels like I am competing with a ghost and your best friend. I opened my mouth, closed it, then forced myself to answer. Yes, I said, and it came out rough but honest. If he cannot respect you or us, he does not get front row seats. I heard the promise leave my mouth and lock into place. Part of me was relieved, another part immediately panicked about the fallout. Grace nodded slowly like she was checking how that felt. That is not just about the wedding, she added, turning toward me. I am talking about group hangs, late-night texts, all of it. Her gaze sharpened as she listed those things one by one. She was not just picturing the ceremony, she was picturing our whole future. I understand, I answered, forcing myself not to soften the terms. I will talk to him, I will make it clear. The idea of that conversation already made my stomach twist up. Tyler did not handle boundaries well on a good day, and this was not that. Still, losing him felt less terrifying than watching her slip away. Grace opened the door and climbed out without another word. The rush of outside air hit the cabin and then vanished. I sat for a second longer, staring at the empty passenger seat. Then I killed the engine and followed her toward the building. I could tell this argument was not done, just moving inside. Inside, she dropped her keys on the counter and crossed her arms. No coat hung up, no shoes exchanged, just straight back into it. I need you to do more than calm me down, she said. Her voice stayed even, but her eyes were tired and sharp. I need you to actually pick a side when T matters. Those words stung because I knew exactly what she meant. I had spent years keeping the peace between people I loved. That talent suddenly looked a lot like cowardice under the kitchen light. I am choosing us, I answered, and this time I meant it fully. I just did not realize yet how much that choice would cost. I typed "we need to talk about" last night and hit send. The message showed delivered and I stared at the screen. 3 dots popped up almost immediately like he had been waiting. "Chill drinks tonight" came back, no question mark even. My chest nodded, but I wrote yes, 7 and locked the phone. By the time I walked into the place, he was already there. He lifted his glass at me like nothing was wrong. "Man of the hour," he called out, voice way too cheerful. I dropped onto the stool beside him without returning the smile. My palms felt damp against the counter and I hated that. "So," he said, turning toward me with that familiar grin. "Did I sleep on your couch or did I miss something?" He nudged my arm like this was banter after a game. That look says I am in trouble with management. The word management hit weird, like he thought this was a sitcom. "This is not a bit," I answered, pulse already climbing. "I am not here to trade jokes, I am pissed." He raised his eyebrows but still looked more amused than worried. "Grace walked out of that dinner upset because of you." The sentence hung there between us like a dare. He shrugged and took a slow drink before replying. "You two really cannot handle a little honesty," he muttered. His thumb ran along the rim of his glass in circles. I dropped a couple of facts, "she can handle it." The way he said facts made my teeth clench. "You went after her on purpose," I answered, leaning closer. "You wanted to see how far you could push it." My voice came out rougher than I expected, almost shaking. "You dragged someone not in the room into our relationship." I could feel my pulse pounding in my neck with every word. He finally looked directly at me, expression turning flatter. "I mentioned someone you used to love, not a criminal," he said. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing just a little as he studied me. "You are acting like I pulled fire alarms at your engagement party." I almost laughed from frustration because he sounded genuinely annoyed. "You did worse," I shot back, fingers curling into fists. "You made Grace feel like she is competing with a rumor." I thought about her hand pressing her ring the night before. "I can live with you making fun of me, not her." My voice dropped on that last part and actually surprised him. He set his glass down and drummed his fingertips once. "So what, you want me to pretend your past vanished?" His mouth twisted, not quite a smile anymore, not yet a scowl. "You loved that woman, everybody knows that, including Grace now." He sounded almost satisfied when he mentioned her learning it. "You are missing the point," I answered, fighting to stay steady. "It is not about pretending, it is about basic respect." I forced myself to breathe before I went any further. "You do not get to decide what my fiancé needs to hear." Saying fiancé out loud made this feel suddenly heavier. He watched me for a moment, then smirked again. "You know what really bothers you?" he asked, leaning in slightly. "That someone else said her name out loud near Grace." He tapped his fingers once more, sharper this time, like punctuation. "You still flinch when you hear it, and you hate that." I opened my mouth to argue and nothing came out. He saw that pause and his smile turned colder around the edges. "You froze yesterday," he went on, voice dropping lower. "You did not just get annoyed, you looked like you saw a ghost." The worst part was that he was not entirely wrong. "I froze because I realized you were willing to humiliate me," I answered. The words surprised even me with how blunt they sounded. "In front of the person I plan to marry, on purpose." I steadied my elbows and leaned toward him until our shoulders touched. "You crossed from teasing to sabotage, and you know it." His jaw moved once, like he was grinding down a reaction. "I am the only one who remembers how you used to talk," he muttered. He laughed once, short and inconsistent, and looked away from me. "You spent years telling me she was the standard for everything." Hearing that out loud made shame flood my face. "That ended when I moved on," I insisted, though my voice dipped. I heard how weak that sounded and almost winced at myself. Whatever dumb things I said back then, I am not there now. I rubbed a hand over my face, suddenly exhausted by him. "You do not get to freeze me in that version forever." He turned back toward me, gaze sharper now, like a challenge. "You still talk about her without realizing it," he replied. You compare, you rewrite, you try to prove you upgraded. He scoffed and reached for his glass again, fingers tight this time. And you want to lecture me about living in the present? My chest squeezed and anger finally broke through the guilt. I am asking you one clear thing, I said, breathing carefully. Stop bringing her up around Grace, stop acting like she belongs here. I paused long enough to make sure he was actually listening. If you cannot do that, you cannot stand up with me. His eyes widened for a split second before he masked it. You are threatening to cut me out over this, he asked. He laughed again, but there was no humor anywhere in it. All because I am not pretending your life started last year. He shook his head slowly like I had just confirmed some theory. This is not about my life starting last year, I answered. It is about the life I am building, getting wrecked on repeat. I could hear my own frustration rising with every word. Grace feels like she is walking into someone else's storyline. Saying it out loud made the situation feel suddenly very real. He stared at the counter, then sighed through his teeth. She reached out when she heard you were engaged, he said. He rolled his shoulders once like he was brushing something off. She wanted to know if you seemed actually happy or just busy. The room felt smaller as soon as those words landed. My throat went dry and I forced myself to ask. How did she hear? I asked, voice coming out more strained. He hesitated for the first time, then took another drink. I might have mentioned it when we grabbed coffee a while back. My nails dug into my palms so hard they almost hurt. So you met up, I said, each word slow and separate. You told her about my engagement before I even knew she knew. He opened his mouth to interrupt and I held up a hand. Did you show her anything, pictures, details, anything? I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips waiting for his answer. He looked annoyed more than guilty, which somehow made it worse. I showed her a shot from your proposal night, he said. She asked, I scrolled, it was not that deep. He shrugged again, but his shoulders were too stiff this time. She said Grace looked sweet, then she changed the subject. The word sweet hit harder than any insult would have. I pictured that old connection glancing at my future through a screen. I wanted to grab the phone out of his hand retroactively. You had no right to share that without asking me, I said. I heard my voice shake openly now and did not care. He rolled his eyes like I was overreacting to nothing. You posted it yourself, he answered, tone getting sharper now. You threw it out for everyone and I passed it along. He spread his hands like the logic was obvious and simple. This righteous act is weird from someone who loved the attention. What attention? I asked, genuinely confused and suddenly nervous. He let that hang for a beat, watching my confusion build. You responded when she messaged congratulations, he said, voice low. You did not tell Grace that part, did you? My stomach lurched like the floor had shifted under my chair. I remembered the notification that night after the proposal. A short message from an old contact, polite and careful and distant. I had replied with 2 lines, nothing romantic, nothing flirty. At the time I convinced myself it was just being mature. Now it sounded exactly like the kind of thing you hide. It was brief, I muttered, suddenly unable to meet his eyes. That does not justify you keeping this weird pipeline open. I hated how defensive I sounded, like a teenager caught lying. You are using my mistake as a free pass for your behavior. He caught that word mistake and smiled in a way I hated. So you admit it felt wrong, he replied, leaning in closer. You liked that she still cared enough to reach out though. His gaze pinned me like he was waiting for me to deny it. Do not dump your guilt on me just because I answer her sometimes. I felt my face heat like I had been slapped across the room. I gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles ached. This is not about who replied to what first, I said. This is about you dragging her presence into my wedding planning. I took a breath through my nose and forced myself calmer. You enjoy poking at the weakest part of my relationship. He stared back, something bitter flashing in his expression. You want to know the truth, he asked, almost whispering now. I think you are rushing into this to prove you moved on. He leaned back, eyes never leaving my face for a second. And I think she sees that even if you pretend otherwise. For a moment the sounds around us faded under that accusation. I could hear nothing except my heart and his words replaying. You do not get to diagnose my motives like that, I answered. You are not in our home when we are actually living together. I bit down on the urge to defend every detail of my relatio. And ship. He watched me struggle, then snorted softly. You would rather I nod and play supportive best man, he said. Smile, hold the ring box, pretend you never called someone else your forever. He shook his head and gave me a tired half laugh. You want a prop, not a friend, and I am not built for that. I swallowed hard and realized something in me had shifted. Friends do not keep forwarding my life to my ex, I answered. Friends do not test my fiancée like she is on a show. My voice finally steadied, even though my hand still trembled slightly. If you cannot stop, you're not standing beside me that day. He went quiet, jaw working, eyes flicking away and back. For a second, I saw hurt under all the attitude and mockery. You are really willing to toss me aside over this line? He asked. His fingers tapped an uneven rhythm on the counter like restless energy. I have been there longer than she has even known you. That is exactly why this matters, I replied, surprising myself again. You know me better than anyone and you still did this. I stared straight at him, refusing to look away first. If you cared about me, you would protect what I am building now. The silence after that sentence felt heavier than any argument. He glanced down, then forced a laugh that sounded tired. I will stay away from the hot topic for now, he said. But I will not pretend she never existed just to keep her comfortable. He drained the rest of his drink and pushed the empty glass away. I will show up, I will stand there, but I am not rewriting history. That answer was half concession, half warning, and we both knew it. I nodded once because I was too drained to keep fighting. Do not ever say her name around Grace again, I said quietly. He raised his hands like a mock promise and gave a short nod. I could tell he agreed to the words, not the spirit. When I stepped outside, my phone buzzed with a message. How did it go? Grace had written just 4 simple words. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, mind replaying everything. Then I typed, we talked, he understands, it will be fine. Even as I hit send, something in my gut twisted hard. Tyler smacked his fork against his glass and got to his feet. Conversation around the table died fast, heads turned toward him. Grace's fingers tightened around my knee under the table and held. I felt my stomach flip because I knew that gesture by now. I will keep this quick, he announced, already grinning too wide. The room gave a polite ripple of attention, just enough noise. He lifted his drink and pointed it toward us like a spotlight. I could smell the alcohol on his breath from where I sat. Every instinct told me to stand up and shut it down. Instead, I stayed in my chair and tried to smile. My brain did that hopeful thing, maybe he would behave. We had that ugly bar conversation, he had promised something. I grabbed on to that memory like it could control him. Looking back, that was the second I lost the night. So, he started, turning slowly as if he loved the stage. I have known this guy since we were dumb and fearless. A few people laughed, my dad included, which did not help. Grace's thumb dragged across my knee again, slower this time. Her eyes never left Tyler's face, like she waited for impact. He went through the usual safe lines, how we met. How many bad apartments we shared, how many schemes we tried. People around us relaxed, I heard a couple of genuine chuckles. For a second I let myself breathe, maybe I misjudged everything. That small bit of relief probably shows on every photo from that moment. Thing is, he continued, tipping his glass in our direction. I always wondered who he would actually end up with. He scanned the room like the answer might be hiding there. The guy used to swear he met his forever person already. I felt every muscle in my body tense at the word forever. Grace shifted beside me barely, but I felt it. Her hand left my leg and folded together in her lap. Tyler's grin sharpened as if he picked up on that movement. He was a wreck when that story crashed and burned, he added. My breathing turned shallow, each inhale like I was stealing air. I cleared my throat and pushed my chair back an inch. Tyler, I cut in, voice low enough for only nearby ears. Wrap it up with the past stuff, stay in the present. He glanced down at me, eyes flicking with something almost defiant. Then he turned back to the room like I was background noise. Back then I honestly thought he would never recover, he said. He could not shut up about this other woman for months. He laughed like we were sharing a harmless story from college. The name came out of his mouth a second later, bright and clean. I watched Grace flinch just once like someone had bumped her chair. My chest went hot, then cold in the space of one breath. Chairs creaked as people shifted, uncomfortable but pretend. They were not. My mom's eyebrows shot up, my brother stared at Tyler in disbelief. Grace stared at the tablecloth as if she could fall through it. I pushed my chair back fully and rose to my feet. That is enough, I said louder now, cutting through the room. A couple of relatives glanced between us like they expected a fistfight. Tyler's smile barely moved, only his jaw tightened around the edges. I am getting to the good part, he answered, tossing his head. Hearing that answer made something snap inside my patience. The good part is now, I shot back, pointing at Grace. She is the only story that matters in this room tonight. My heart hammered hard enough that my voice almost shook apart. We are not doing history lessons, sit down or change the subject. For a heartbeat I actually thought that would pull him back. He looked at her instead of me and softened his tone. Hey, I am not trying to disrespect you, he told her. I just want you to know what you walked into. He lifted his glass again like he could toast that sentence. Grace's lips parted like she wanted to answer, then closed. Tyler barreled on, eyes gleaming with a kind of mean honesty. You are marrying a guy who once planned everything with someone else, he said. He spent nights at my place going over baby names and cities. A few people laughed awkwardly, thinking that detail was exaggerated. I knew it was not, and that detail sat heavy in my throat. Grace turned her head slowly and looked straight at me now. Her expression was not dramatic, just stunned like she misread the script. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, maybe deny him. Tyler cut across the moment before I could pull a sentence together. And then she called me last month just to check on him, he added. That line hit the room harder than the name itself. Forks stopped moving, chairs went still, even the background music felt quieter. Grace's hand moved toward her ring without her looking down. She did not twist it this time, she pulled it halfway off. I felt the floor tilt under me like we were on a ship. I stepped closer to Tyler and grabbed his forearm tighter this time. You are done, I hissed, not caring who heard in that moment. You promised you were done with this, you promised me that. He tried to pull his arm back, annoyed rather than apologetic. His glass sloshed, a few drops landing on the table in front of us. I promised to leave the name out, he muttered, eyes flashing. I never said I would lie about what is still happening. He jerked his arm free and turned back toward our families. Relax, it was just a friendly call, he announced with a shrug. She wanted to know if he was really happy or just settling. Grace pushed her chair back so fast it scraped across the floor. Every head swung toward her as she stood, pale but steady. She slid the ring the rest of the way off her finger. The metal clicked softly against the table when she set it down. That tiny sound cut through me more than any shout could have. I need air, she said, voice tight, eyes never leaving mine. She walked around the table, shoulders stiff, avoiding every outstretched hand. Someone called her name, maybe my mom, maybe her sister, I could not track. The door swung open and shut behind her with a dull smack. I felt the urge to run after her, fight with the urge to explode. All eyes swung back to me like I was about to perform. Tyler still stood there, breathing a little faster, jaw clenched. My dad cleared his throat, clearly searching for something to diffuse. A cousin laughed nervously and lifted his glass halfway, then stopped. The whole room hovered on the edge of either chaos or silence. I turned and faced Tyler fully, every muscle shaking from restraint. You just told her about a call I did not even know about, I said. You turned my rehearsal dinner into a confession I never got to give. He stared back, almost daring me to keep going in front of everyone. A part of me wanted to swing on him right there. Instead, I leaned in close enough for only him to hear. You are not standing next to me tomorrow if she walks away tonight, I whispered. You wanted truth, here is one, you are not on my side. He flinched, just a small movement, but I saw it clearly. For the first time that night, his confidence cracked around the edges. I straightened up and grabbed the ring from the table with shaking fingers. My mother reached for my arm, asking where I was going. Her voice sounded far away, like it came through a tunnel. I have to find her, I answered, already moving toward the door. Every step felt like walking out of one life and into another. As I pushed through the exit, noise from inside hit my back. Voices overlapped, chairs moved, someone tried to laugh it off. I heard Tyler call my name once, sharp and frustrated and small. I did not look back because if I did I might stay. I stepped outside into the night with the ring biting my palm. I spotted Grace near the far end of the parking lot. She stood with her back to the building, arms folded tight. The ring was still in my fist, pressing into my skin. I walked toward her, each step loud in my own head. She did not move until I was only a few feet away. "Stop there." Her voice clipped through the air and nailed me in place. She did not look at me, just stared past my shoulder. I froze mid-step, feeling stupid and guilty and weirdly exposed. For a second, I had no idea what to do with my hands. I managed, lifting the ring a little. My fingers shook, which only made it look more pathetic. She glanced at it once fast, then back at the ground. "That is not the problem," she said, jaw tight, shoulders stiff. Hearing that hurt more than if she had told me to leave. I closed the distance anyway, slower, careful, heart pounding hard. She did not tell me to back off again, which felt hopeful. I stopped at arm's length and kept the ring between us. "I had no idea about that call," I said, voice rough. "I learned it with you in that room." "I believe that part," she answered, eyes still sharp and tired. "If you knew, you would have spun some story earlier." She let out a short breath that almost turned into a laugh. "But you did tell me he understood and it was handled." She finally looked right at me and that part burned. My chest tightened because she was absolutely right about that message. "I thought I had gotten through to him," I said, words slow. "I thought ego was the only issue and I could manage that." I shook my head once, hating the way it sounded out loud. I underestimated how far he would go to prove a point. "That is the pattern," she said, hands dropping to her sides. "You keep believing you can manage him and then I pay for it." She took a step back like she needed more air between us. "I asked you for one simple thing and I watched it explode." Her eyes were glossy now, but the tears did not fall. I wanted to reach for her and did not dare. "Tell me what you need from me right now," I said. "Not from him, from me, us, whatever this still is." The words came out clumsy, but at least they were real. I knew any polished speech would kill this conversation instantly. She studied my face like she was searching for something hidden. "I need space from your friend and from this wedding," she answered. Her voice shook on the word wedding, then steadied again. "I cannot walk down an aisle wondering who else knows more." She swallowed and lifted her chin like she was bracing for impact. "So you are calling it off?" I asked, throat suddenly dry. The word off scraped on the way out and tasted like panic. She shook her head, then nodded, then shook it again. "I am hitting pause," she finally said, choosing that word carefully. "I am not promising I will hit play again." That distinction cut deeper than a straight breakup in some ways. I slipped the ring into my pocket because my hand had gone numb. "What does pause look like?" I asked, needing something concrete. She looked toward the road as if expecting an answer from there. "I am staying at my sister's for a while," she said. The mention of her sister snapped the timeline into something real. "I do not want to talk about venues or menus or any of it," she added. "I need time where your ex is not in every conversation." Her mouth twisted around that word like it tasted sour and heavy. "And I need time where your best man is not narrating your life." "I can cut him out," I said, the words landing before I planned them. She flinched, more at the speed than the content, I think. "You say that like you are throwing away extra furniture," she answered. "You have known him for years longer than you have loved me." She waited, daring me to argue with that timeline. "I have also never watched a piece of furniture humiliate you," I replied. The sentence came out harsh and a little shaky around the edges. I should have removed him the first time he crossed a line. I dragged a hand over my face, feeling 10 years older. Keeping him close has been about comfort, not loyalty. That admission stunned even me for a second. She noticed because she always notices when truth slips out. "Then why did you pick him as best man?" she asked. I had no good answer, so I gave the ugly one. "Because I was scared of who I would be without him." There it was, laid out between us, embarrassing and honest. She stared at me, eyes softer but still full of hurt. "That is what worries me," she said, voice lower now. "If you do not know yourself without him, how do I?" The question hung there and I had no quick fix. "I can start by proving it," I said after a beat. "Not with speeches, with actual choices that you can watch." I pulled my phone from my pocket and unlocked it. My thumb hovered over Tyler's name, the one pinned at top. For the first time, I felt more anger than nostalgia looking at it. "I am going to uninvite him," I said, screen glowing in my hand. Not just from the wedding, from us, from this mess. Her eyes widened a fraction, like she had not expected action now. This is not about pleasing you for points, I added quickly. This is about not sharing a life with someone who enjoys chaos. She did not tell me to stop, which was its own answer. I opened our chat and scrolled past jokes and plans and old chaos. Seeing all of it hurt, but in a clear way, not a confusing way. I tapped the message box and typed slowly, reading each word twice. I knew once I hit send there was no going back. Tomorrow you are not coming, I wrote, fingers trembling over the screen. You are no longer in the wedding, and you are not welcome around Grace. I need distance from you and from everything you keep dragging in. My thumb hovered over send, my heart hammering like it wanted out. Then I pressed it before I could talk myself out of it. The message whooshed away and left the screen feeling strangely empty. A second later, the status ticked to delivered and stayed there. No dots, no instant comeback, just blank space and my own breathing. I locked the phone and slid it back into my pocket slowly. I chose you, I said, voice flat with exhaustion but clear. She wrapped her arms around herself like she was cold. I see what you did, she answered, eyes flicking to my pocket. It matters, I am not going to pretend it doesn't matter. She paused and bit her lip like she was holding something back. It does not instantly erase the fact that he was right about one thing. My chest tightened again because I knew what she meant. He was right that you enjoyed still being important to her, she continued. You would not have replied otherwise, even just those few words. I opened my mouth to argue, then shut it because she had me. I hated that he had read me that clearly and that she could too. I answered because I was chasing closure I should have found alone, I said. I wanted proof I was a good guy now, not some villain. I laughed once, short and humorless, because it sounded pathetic. All I did was drag the past into the middle of us. Saying it out loud felt like ripping off my own cover. She exhaled slowly and leaned back against a nearby car. For a moment she looked less furious and more just tired. I do not want to build a marriage on half confessions, she said. I need to know you will tell me the uncomfortable things first. Her eyes locked on mine, waiting to see if I would flinch. I should have told you about that message the same day, I admitted. I did not because I wanted to keep looking spotless in your eyes. The words tasted bitter and a little freeing at the same time. I would rather you see me clearly than feel safe on a lie. My voice cracked on lie and I let it happen. She nodded just once, like that landed somewhere deep but uncertain. I am not promising anything tonight, she said, gaze drifting away again. I need time and I need you to give it without pressure. She straightened and reached her hand toward me, palm up. Let me have the ring, I want to decide what to do with it. I pulled it from my pocket and placed it in her hand. Her fingers closed around it, sharp and deliberate like a decision. She slid it into her own pocket instead of putting it back on. That little move told me exactly where we stood for now. Not over, not okay, just somewhere fragile in between. I will text you when I get to my sister's place, she said. I do not want you to follow me there or try to argue. Her voice stayed steady, which somehow hurt more than tears. Use this time to grow up without an audience, she added quietly. Then we will see if there is still in us worth saving. She turned and started walking toward the curb without looking back. I stayed rooted where I was, watching her shrink with each step. Every part of me screamed to run after her and beg. Instead, I forced myself to stay put, to respect the boundary. That was my first real act of love that night, and it felt awful. When she disappeared around the corner, the noise from inside drifted out. Laughter that did not fit, chairs scraping, someone raising their voice. I realized our families were in there trying to make sense of nothing. I took a deep breath and went back toward the door anyway. If I had wrecked the night, I could at least own it. Inside, conversations cut off as soon as I stepped through. Her sister stood up first, eyes blazing like she wanted answers now. My parents hovered near the table, whispering to each other, clearly rattled. Tyler was gone, his chair empty, plate abandoned, glass still there. That empty space hit me harder than his presence ever had. People started talking at once, questions flying, voices overlapping in waves. Where is she? What happened? Is the wedding still happening? I lifted both hands and the noise dropped unevenly. I messed up, I said, and that did more than any explanation. I told them the short version, just enough to stop speculation. Not the messages, not every detail, just the concrete tonight facts. She needed time, she would be safe, the ceremony was not tomorrow. I watched disappointment and shock move across faces in little waves. We had hired outfits and booked rooms, and now everything dangled. Later, after people drifted out in small groups, I sat alone. The room felt huge and empty and full of unsaid things. My phone finally buzzed with two new notifications at once. One from Grace, one from Tyler, stacked on top of each other. Of course they would arrive together, like the universe enjoyed symmetry. Her message came first on the screen when I opened it. "Got here, I am safe, I need some quiet now." No emoji, no extra words, just that small slice of information. I stared at it until my eyes stung from not blinking. Then I typed, "Thank you for letting me know, I will give you that quiet." I did not write "I love you," even though I wanted to. It felt selfish to add those words into that moment. I hit send and watched the status flip to read almost instantly. No response followed, which hurt and also felt fair. I set the phone down for a second and rubbed my face. Then I picked the phone back up and opened Tyler's chat. His message waited longer, filled with the energy I expected. "Wow, you really threw me under the bus in front of everyone. After everything I have done for you over the years. Good luck having a life with no one who actually knows you." Old me would have answered right away, defending myself and the choice. I would have written paragraphs, arguing line by line, trying to convince him. Instead, I read it twice, then pressed down on our thread. The option to mute appeared, a small, simple button on a screen. I hit it and watched the little icon appear beside his name. I did not block him, at least not that night. Maybe that was cowardice, maybe it was leaving a door cracked. What mattered was that for the first time he did not have my instant attention. I set the phone face down and listened to the quiet around me. It sounded strange and uncomfortable and maybe, just maybe, like a beginning.